All right, well, this is going to be a little different video than the usual ones where I'm talking about projects that I'm working on or specific things on how to rebuild motors or etc. Here I just want to kind of go through generic questions I get all the time. If anyone's done EVs, I've been doing this since 2009, gets the question all the time of, I have blank and I want to convert it into an EV. How much is it going to cost and where should I start? And invariably, the question, unfortunately, I have to say is 95% of the time, the answer is no, you probably shouldn't build an EV. I'll say the reason for that is most of the time people say, well, I want to have a 200-mile range. I want a 0 to 60 that's less than 6 seconds. I don't want to spend more than $10,000, and I want to daily drive it and be reliable every day and have air conditioning and heat. And I'm doing this really because I have this other car and the motor died, and I think this would be a great idea. One of the big rules that I come up for doing EVs is start with a good car to begin with. Can't emphasize that enough. So often people they find, oh, I got this car for $500, it's a perfect candidate. Yeah, it needs new suspension and brakes, and it's got some rust, but I can fix all that stuff. Don't combine a restoration project with a conversion project. That is very likely going to not end as a project that you are driving around. There are exceptions to that, of course. If you have a sentimental attachment to a car, it's like my '69 Bug was my grandfather's car. My dad and my son, we converted that over to electric. It's going to stay in the family. I'm not going to daily drive it. It doesn't have heat and air conditioning. It needs work, but there's sentimental attachment. The value of the car is far beyond its practical value. If you just want a commuter car, you can go buy a Leaf that has, well, they say 80, 60 miles of range for $5 or $6 grand these days. I can't build. Even with me scrounging parts, I cannot build an EV for cheaper than you can just buy a Nissan Leaf with a warranty. And honestly, it's got heat, it's got air conditioning, it's got ABS. If you just want a commuter car, Leaf's not my favorite, but that's just one example. There are many other EVs out there as well, especially with shorter range. If you just want to, if you have a 20-mile each-way commute, so 40, 60 miles, somewhere in that range round trip, then those work just great. If you want to be at the other end, you want to say I really like my Porsche 911, but I want 300 miles of range. Well, you look at a Porsche 911, there's not places to put those battery sizes. Part of the reason I did Silent, the race truck, was I wanted a truck because I knew I was going to be testing different batteries and different setups. I can swap batteries in and out of that bed in 5 minutes. That's a function of a pickup truck. If you are working on a Bug, there's some good places to squirrel away, but you're not going to get a long range vehicle that way. So start with a very good car to begin with. Don't mix a restoration and an EV conversion. As far as budget, you can do things for cheap. I think Silent, all told, which is definitely an outlier because it's the fastest electric truck in the world, but it's made out of used parts. Chevy Volt batteries, here's some over here, and all secondhand parts. I don't think there's a single part on there that I bought that was new. Maybe the DC-DC converter, no, the contactors. I brought contactors new, but past that, every other part is from somebody else's conversion that they were selling, or they were used junkyard parts like the Volt batteries, or left over from one of my other projects, etc., etc. Now, that being said, I probably have about 13 or 14,000 into that. That's with used Shiva 3,000 amp controller. I've dynoed it at 800 horsepower, so you don't have to have huge amounts of money, but that also is definitely definitely as far as the exception, not the rule. I have a selection of batteries here. When I started out, 2009, I did a motorcycle, the Honda Leadwing. Play on words that turned Goldwing into lead. So I took something that had some value and made it inherently not valuable. Well, that's another thing. Don't convert an EV and expect to get your money's worth back out of it. Your time is going to be free, and then chances are, if you do find someone to buy it, you'll end up selling it for considerably less than you had your parts. But that's a whole other thing. So, anyways, 2009 when I built the lead wing, these are Concorde aircraft batteries that I got essentially for scrap, and it worked. It was heavy. I made it a trike so I could actually handle the weight, but there was a whole lot of other problems with the project. But lead acid doesn't make sense nowadays. There is no reason to do a lead acid conversion, short of someone gave you a bunch of batteries for free, and even then I'd argue it's not worth it. The reason why I say that is you can buy a Chevy Volt Pack, and you can check out my other videos where I've gone on and on about how you can buy a Chevy Volt Pack for about $1,000, $1,500, and that's a 15 kilowatt pack that will put out, it puts out about 1,000 amps at 380 volts. More than enough power for the average user by far. The T-shaped battery is a little difficult to deal with, but not terrible. I made up my own racks here. I showed in the previous videos for the E30. I just reused the T-shape and cut it up and put a new frame into it. I need to do an update video on that. And you can have a battery pack for $1,000, $2,000 there. The other option is the Tesla packs. Tesla packs have very good energy density. That's the nice thing. If you want a lot of range, then the Tesla packs are really hard to beat. They are, even building your own pack from, say, money no object, but fairly close to it, you're probably not going to beat the energy density of the Tesla packs. The disadvantage of that, everything is a trade, so you give up that energy density, or by getting that energy, you give up power density. Everyone thinks Teslas are really powerful, but that's because they have a ginormous pack. If you have a 100 kilowatt hour pack, you don't need a very high discharge rate to get a lot of power. The cooling on those, it does have a liquid cooling loop that you can use for heating and cooling. It's okay. It's certainly better than like the Nissan Leaf where you have nothing. It's a coolant loop that loops back in and out of the cells there. It's kind of a part of the difficulty of using those 18650s is that they're cylindrical cells. So really you only cool half the side of the cell, and it really limits how much heat you can pull out of it. There's a nice thing about the prismatics, why every manufacturer except for Tesla has gone with prismatics, is partially because you can actually cool it. You have the Chevy Volt Pack, and there's others. I'm just talking about the Volt because I have plenty of those around. There's a cooling plate in between every cell. This is for the Gen 1 volts and the Gen 2. The Bolt, if I remember right, has cooling plates every other cell, but you still have a very large surface area for the size of battery. It does add weight, but if you're not doing a very big pack and you're doing a high discharge rate, you gotta get that heat out. Otherwise, you end up killing the battery and having overheating issues. Again, reference the Nissan Leaf and the lawsuits there. But the Tesla packs, again, very good, the best energy density. That's going to be particularly useful for the next project, which is sitting over there, but I'm not quite ready to do a video on that. I'm still, can't wait to get onto that. But the disadvantage of the Tesla ones is they're the most well known, and so people are buying them up and they have a much higher value. It's all supply and demand when it comes to used parts. Most people don't think of Chevy Volts and or any of the other packs. Nissan Leaf, those are kind of well known, but everyone who knows anything or knows what an electric car is knows what Tesla is, and they want their technology. So these get used in grid storage quite often, and people's conversions, as long as they're not looking for high performance or for a small size pack. As a result, one of these 5.4 kilowatt hour packs costs the same amount as a Chevy Volt Pack, which is 3 times the energy density and 3 times the energy, lower energy density, and 6 times the power. So if you're on a budget, you have a smaller pack, the Volt, I believe the Kia Soul EV has an interesting pack as well. And then again, reference the Nissan Leaf cooling issues. There are ways around that, or if you're doing a low discharge rate, you're maybe using it for a smaller conversion where you're not going to use as much power. Those can work out just well, just fine. So that's the quick and dirty of the batteries. Again, if you want to, I'm going to do more detailed ones on the Tesla, especially talking with the Tesla BMS. And I've got tons of other videos on the Chevy Volt. Just check the channel. Motors. So DC motors. I've got some ACs. I use DC motors because honestly I had to control it. A deal came up on getting a Shiba, used Shiba, and which for those who know was made by Evnetics. I believe it's still the most powerful single electric vehicle controller on the planet. For a car, 3,000 amps up to 425 volts. And you're talking about, I think it's 1.6 megawatts, somewhere in there. Haven't been able to get to that power, but that's a whole nother story. Again, reference to the other videos. So, but having those controllers, you can get very good power for short durations. That being said, AC is really the way to go if your budget can afford it. Brush DC, you can usually get components for cheap. They've been available to the DIY market for a lot longer. I've got like Logitech and Kodiak controllers over there. You know, you're not going to get screaming performance. Maybe in the 500, between say 500 amps and they say 1200 amps, but you probably won't get it to that level. The Solitons you saw in the previous videos. Obviously the Zilla is still in production by Manzanita Micro. Really nice product. I've never heard really any complaints, other than the design stay a little more dated. You're using sometimes you have to use a Palm Pilot to do programming, but past that, it's a very nice system. That being said, Brush DC, it's got a host of issues. Nothing insurmountable. You can certainly use it, and budget-wise is the way to go. But really looking forward, AC is the way to go. People are using for high-power applications. People are converting the Tesla modules over, et cetera, et cetera. HPVS, again, lower power, but and a little bit more expensive, but you get regen and things like that. So that the motors, you know, I guess I'm trying to think of what else to cover there, but the other option is build your own battery pack. This is what I had this guy on here. This is the first battery pack that I made. This was back in 2010 on the Mazda Miata. Actually would autocross it. It was a real fun car to drive. Fortunately, I was towing it to a race and left it in gear and didn't have a motor anymore. The other thing, I started fixing it, but then another thing I ran into is I used A123 pouch cells that I got from a dealer in China. They started degrading very soon after starting use. There's an interesting failure mode. I think I've talked about in previous videos, but in the pouch cell, you actually get essentially corrosion that happens in the Mylar sheets, and then the cells start to leak, and you can run into a host of problems. There's actually NASA did a study on this for pouch cells, and they found that if you don't have good isolation between the inner and outer layers, you'll get galvanic corrosion that happens inside there. That's the disadvantage of buying cells from, let's just say not a reputable dealer, is you don't know where they come from. But I find out later that chances are these batteries were actually factory rejects. That's how they were able to get it. This is back in 2010. No one would sell batteries to individuals. That's why I was lead, and I didn't want to lead anymore. I wanted to move up to lithium, and so I built I built this pack up from individual cells. I will never do that again. I strongly suggest no one does it. These pouch cells, I had 300 some odd of them that I charged and discharged each one individually so that I could capacity balance them. They're put together in a series of three in parallel, and then I was running a system voltage of, that was like around 300 volts if I remember correctly. And the amount of time it takes to assemble all of this, it was many, many hours, and I, like I said, won't do that again, and don't recommend it either. There are also a lot of other cells now that companies, big companies, are selling to individuals. Interdel cells, I've used those. Got those from Evolve Electric. Nice. They're passively cooled. They actually have an aluminum plate with fins on the outside, so you can actually heat or cool those batteries rather than just relying on conduction through the length of the pack. But yeah, don't do the individual cells. There's really no reason. If you're budget constrained, go to a junkyard, get an EV, reuse those batteries rather than, a lot of junkyards actually won't even want to deal with them. They don't know what to do with them. They're afraid of them. It's sad that some of those quite a few of those just end up, well, being disposed of. I don't know how well disposed of. For small pack, the Volt ones are the kind of ones I decided on. Again, those previous videos I go through all the data on the Department of Energy and how they did a bunch of testing on batteries, and those are the ones that I decided on. The Tesla modules are really good for energy density, and if you're doing a big pack and you're not having relatively big pack, and when I talking about a DIY pack, 50 kilowatt hours is a big pack. Just trying to find room to fit all that. If you're not designing a car around a battery pack, you're going to start running out of places to fit batteries pretty quickly. I've got, so I can put up to around 45 kilowatt hours in the back of the S10, but that's having a whole pickup bed full of batteries just to put it in contacts. So anyway, that's the kind of my intro onto DIY EVs. The very first questions are, should I do it? Is the question you should ask. Figure out, what do you really want to do? Are you doing it because you just think it's fun, you have a sentimental attachment, and you want to convert it, and you're always going to keep the car? If that's the case, then you can move on to the next question. If it's, I want a practical commuter car to do 100 miles of range and all those other things I mentioned before, chances are it's probably not going to make sense. There are secondhand used cars out there that are probably better suited. But so if you do want to do it for education, learning, it's fun, you want to do it as a hobby, you're going to dedicate the time to it, because these things just don't happen overnight, then the next question is budget. How much can you spend on that? Start looking at what you want to do for as batteries. Again, you can, for a small pack, and I'm talking about a 30-mile range, you can spend about $1,000, $2,000, get a Volt or a Kia or a Nissan pack, and not gonna have necessarily blistering performance, but you can go that route, and then you can just add more performance and range as the budget goes up from there. Kind of 10 grand is what I'd say that realistically is going to be the minimum for a what I'd say a decent conversion that you're actually going to drive down the highway and be able to commute into it. But again, it's not, if you're looking at as far as doing something practical, and I'm talking about all this in the U.S. If you are in another part of the world where secondhand EVs aren't available, or there's a myriad of other contributing factors, very well makes sense to, in your area, to build one. I'm just speaking here for the U.S. So, and then of all that, you figure out, okay, I've got this budget, I got enough room to put all the batteries in. I'm gonna dedicate many hundreds of hours, I'll say hundreds of hours doing the conversion. Then start looking at components, asking questions to the DIY forums or the DIY Facebook group, et cetera, and you'll find people much more receptive than this video kind of came about because the number of people just in the past week that have posted, I want to do an EV conversion, where do I start? And then everyone lists the exact same questions every time of, what do you want to do with it? What do you want for range, performance? How much do you have to spend? And then once you get through all of that, you find out that their expectations of what they can do and what reality are don't necessarily line up. So I hope this was helpful, and the next video I'll be talking about what's behind the camera. All right, I feel bad that I'm stringing along talking about the next project but not showing it. I'll give you a sneak peek here. Again, I've just got it last week, the week before, and really trying to take stock of what I've actually got to figure out what the plan is. and I've shot some video, but I'll get it all wrapped up and actually give a proper introduction to it in the next week or so. But there, that's your sneak peek.